Some initial background. Many of you have probably seen this slide before. It's quite often used. And it's a slide of the first scientific journal. It's from Philosophical Transactions, and it was published in 1665. So at that point, there was no peer review, but it was the first publication of an article where scientists had a way of then sharing science with other scientists. What's interesting is that despite that being 350 years ago, really not an awful lot has changed about the way science is published. So peer review did come in around the 1940s, but aside from that, we still do things very much in the way that they were done in the print era. Despite the fact we've had the internet, and in fact the internet has changed the way we do most things in our lives. And with regards to publishing, obviously it's brought in online submission, online publishing, and in fact most journals now don't bother printing at all. And it's enabled us to have open access. And as you can see from this graph, the massive growth of open access since the year 2000. These traditional publishing practices give this illusion of ensuring that only valid science reaches the public domain through the standard peer review system. And yet, of course, if you look at the rates of retractions over the years, so this is from 1980 to the current day, you can see particularly in the last few years, there's been a massive growth in retraction rate. So clearly, peer review isn't doing what we need it to do, what we would like it to do. There's been calls for change, particularly with regards to peer review, for quite a number of years now. So I just pulled off a few examples. Many years ago, there was a whole issue of Nature talking about the challenges and the problems with peer review. Richard Smith is well known for talking about the problem with peer review and the flawed process. And even in the UK, the House of Commons Science and Technology Committee weighed in and started looking at peer review, looking at the problems and asking, should the government be trying to help do something about this? And then more recently, Nature, a couple of weeks ago, did another issue looking at the future of publishing and looking at how people are starting to finally look at different models. There's also very recently been a lot of policy changes around the world. So a couple of examples, the US Office of Science and Technology have in the last few weeks issued a couple of policy changes. One, expanding their public access policy generally to open access and to the requirement that all publicly funded research needs to be made fully accessible to everyone, but also extending that into data as well. And so in the last couple of years, there's been a number of initiatives, a number of policy changes. There was the Royal Society Open Data Report, The Science as an Open Enterprise, and there's been a number of initiatives, the EU, the US, looking at how we make the data behind scientific publication openly available. So there were 5 key issues that we're going to be talking about today and that we're trying to approach and tackle with F1000Research. One is looking at publication delays and how we can eliminate those. One is looking at the publication of non-standard studies. Another is looking at this key issue of open data and the importance of publishing the data underlying publications. One is looking at the whole peer review process and how we can end this whole closed secret process that peer review traditionally uses. And then the final one is looking at the importance of open access.